The other day, I went to a concert in town where Hans Zimmer was performing live. It was an experience that I was extremely excited for, and I couldn't wait to be a part of that. There was a bit of something he played during that concert I'd like to share with you. And it's as good a segue as any into talking about The Dark Knight, which is the second movie in the Dark Knight trilogy, and one that doesn't really need any other introductions, because at this point of time, I'd like to think that everybody has had something to say about The Dark Knight. It's interesting looking back on it 16 years later, because leading up to that was such an interesting time. So, to paraphrase the Joker, let's wind the clocks back 19 years. I just watched Batman Begins. It ended with this amazing moment where Gordon hands Batman a Joker card, and immediately you know where the next story is going to go. You can't wait to see how the Joker is going to be interpreted in this, how he's going to, do things in Gotham, and immediately I was thinking about that. And if you knew Joker in most pieces of media at that point of time, you knew that there was something very sadistically funny about him. Like, he could make awful things happen with a smile on his face. You're thinking that going in, that there's going to be some of that. But at the same time, it really just did blindside people what the interpretation ended up being. The Dark Knight is one of the few movies that I have watched with my dad, and both of us in the theater were kind of questioning whether or not the movie was rated correctly. It was rated PG-13, but I am convinced it was 5 frames away from being rated R, because this is a very intense and violent movie, and one that is really, really dark. I mean, right out the gate, just from the robbery sequence, and then as it progresses, it just gets even more intense. And really, the movie does take swings which were totally unexpected. To date, it is considered the greatest comic book movie of all time and one of the greatest movies ever made. And for good reason. I would rank it the same. It is currently my #1 comic book movie. And after that, yes, it is one of my favorite movies of all time. I can talk about this all the time. But it's so interesting also because I remember before it came out, the idea of Heath Ledger as the Joker was something that was a bit of a question mark for people. At that point of time, people had seen him in 10 Things I Hate About You, or A Knight's Tale, which he was also really great in, and of course, Brokeback Mountain, which was fantastic. And going into The Dark Knight, none of those roles really screamed Joker. You never really saw those and went, that guy could be the Joker. And so immediately, there was some, mixed reactions to that, like, I don't know about this. But obviously, in the time since, you know that things have changed dramatically when it comes to that opinion, and eventually what you ended up getting with Heath Ledger is one of the finest performances in cinema, pretty much, and one that is referenced to date. People chase this even now, and it sucks that he wasn't there to see it. As you all know, probably, he passed several months before the movie came out. He was very young. And it was a tragic situation, and it's a cloud that loomed over the entire movie. So going into it, while there was a lot of hype and excitement, there was also a sense of tragedy around it. And it's sad seeing these scenes play out because, again, you really wish that, he had gotten to see just how much people embraced his portrayal. As the Joker, he is incredible in this movie. Every single moment with him, he is doing so much with this character visually and with the dialogue that is beyond unbelievable. And he's also embracing the darkly funny aspects of the character at times, while also bringing forward the themes of, pressure and pushing everyone to the point of chaos as well as can possibly be done. His entire motivation in this movie centered around the nicest of people, the ones who believe in codes. They will once, at some point of time, decide those structures don't matter anymore. And eventually that'll fall apart and they will make decisions that they have sworn they will never make. And the movie tests the characters because of that. Batman, Gordon, Harvey Dent, these are the 3 who are helping, take down crime in Gotham right now. And they're the ones who are constantly being pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. And it's really, really great stuff. I have so many fond memories of watching this movie over and over again. At this point of time, it's one of my most rewatched movies of all time. I have analyzed this thing so much, and it's bears analyzing. I mean, really, this is as good as it gets. You know, when you make a movie like this, you can't possibly imagine something to be even better than that. We'll talk more about that aspect in the next video. But one thing I immediately love about The Dark Knight, aside from all the Joker stuff that I've said, is how different it feels compared to Batman Begins. That was a more gothic noir tale and something that showed Gotham as this, rundown, rancid piece of, whatever it was at the time, with the browns and yellows and oranges all over the place. In The Dark Knight, everything's got this sheen of blue and everything looks a little cleaner. It's like, hey, crime's being handled, things seem to be urbanizing a lot more. There's, Gotham's gentrification process, if you will. And it has that kind of shine throughout the movie. And it gives it this unique sense of identity that I absolutely love about it, and one that, again, like I said, I love revisiting. It's also helped that visually, this film is gorgeous. This was the first major project to use IMAX film cameras. There are some sequences over here that absolutely are, they look dazzling in IMAX. And it's one of the greatest uses of that photography to date. Between this and The Dark Knight Rises, they did a great job of incorporating that technology into this movie, because these sequences, particularly that Hong Kong sequence, those look phenomenal. In fact, it's a funny story about that Hong Kong scene. 2 months before the movie came out, one of the first major family trips that we took internationally, actually the first international trip, was to Hong Kong. Watching the movie 2 months later, it was sort of like that Leonardo DiCaprio meme now from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, pointing at the screen. So while I was in the theater with my dad, we were like, oh, remember that point? It was like that point over there. We were over there. We were on that street corner. We saw that building from this angle. It was just very, very fun. Like the building he base jumps off of is, that was a building that we used to see all the time. It's awesome. It's just really cool to look back on some of that. And that whole sequence is phenomenal. And the characterization past the Joker is also really good. You really see Bruce Wayne and Batman tested to their limits here. You're seeing Bruce accept the fact that there are some things that he cannot do. And even Batman is not entirely capable of solving everything with the code that he has. Sometimes there might be drastic decisions made, but the Joker wants that. If it happens, then he wins. And the whole movie, with that pressure building, is testing Gordon and Harvey Dent as well. Harvey, of course, being the one who gets tested the most, and eventually the tragedy of what happens to Rachel leading to him becoming Two-Face. Which, you know what? Let's talk about this. So the Rachel moment. Here's a retrospective for you. After what I consider one of the greatest comic book scenes of all time, the interrogation scene between Batman and Joker, it's a race against time to get to Rachel and Harvey Dent, who are both about to be killed. And it's a matter of who are you going to save in time. And so Batman heads towards what is apparently Rachel, and the cops head towards Harvey Dent. Of course, it turns out to be a switcheroo, because Batman actually ends up being at Harvey Dent's place. And that whole sequence is built around a 5-minute timer. Now, first of all, props to the editing. If you count the time in that scene, it actually is 5 minutes, which is pretty amazing. Like it's all happening in real time over there. But more than that, it's just one of those things where I remember in the theater, you often think the hero saves the girl. That was one of those rules that stood the test of time. Like, hey, superhero movie, of course she's gonna live, he's gonna save her. And it turns out, in this case, Rachel dies. And it's this shocking moment because you could hear pin drop silence throughout the entire crowd. You just had no idea what to expect. But it was also a bold move, because suddenly you realize this is not your average superhero movie. Up until now it wasn't, but now it definitely isn't. And it has done something that has just broken that code. Now it's going to push these characters to points they didn't want to be pushed to. And the movie very smartly utilizes that. It's a really heart-stopping moment. And then Joker escaping from the GCPD in the cop car, that shot of him outside the window. I mean, it is really fantastic direction, and that it's wonderfully done. It makes it seem also real because suddenly everyone's on the line now. Anyone can die, because at that point you're like, oh man, the hero didn't save the girl. That means anything could happen. The next body could be a main character's. And it's that level of stakes that makes the Dark Knight trilogy also effective. It doesn't feel like anybody is safe at any point. Anyone could die. And that continues into The Dark Knight Rises, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll talk more about that when we get there. As for the action, like I said, it's all brilliant. Some of those sequences are phenomenal. The whole chase sequence where Harvey's trying to take the fall for being the Batman and eventually the convoy is attacked. Great sequence. The ejection of the Bat Pod into the streets after the Batmobile is damaged. Incredible stuff. All of this in the movie scored once again perfectly by Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard. The score won a Grammy, which was awesome. Like, I mean, it really did deserve that Grammy. It's one of the best soundtracks, and it's one that I constantly listen to. Oh, and of course, the hospital blowing up. One of the few times where you want something to work, and it actually ended up working out perfectly, down to that little, I guess, not improvised moment with Joker. I don't know. I mean, I guess that's an urban myth that was apparently improvised, but at the same time, it works perfectly. But that explosion, that really, it was just one shot. If they mess this up, it doesn't happen again. They pulled it off wonderfully. Visually, it was incredible. That entire sequence, the final sequence in the building as the ferries are ticking down to whether or not they're going to blow each other up, or, you're going to get to Joker first and stop it all from happening. It's all very tense stuff. Batman working up the levels of that building one by one using that sonar technique, which he's worked on with Fox, is really great. Or against Fox, because he's not totally with the idea. I mean, it maps out a little bit of a room, but essentially it applies to all of Gotham at one point. And I love Fox in this movie. I mean, I think as a character, Lucius Fox in Batman Begins I really like, but in The Dark Knight, he's so cool, and he gets to really, showcase some of that agency towards Batman, being like, listen, some of this is not right. Some of this is wrong, but also trying to hide the fact that he's Bruce Wayne. Like, there's that great scene with Mr. Reese as he's trying to figure out who Batman is, and then he challenges him on that. He's like, you think your client is a vigilante who goes around beating criminals, and your plan is to blackmail this person? Good luck. Perfect. Great line. I mean, the whole movie is filled with moments like that. There's that great sequence with the commissioner's funeral happening where Joker is disguised as a cop. But this is the point where I bring up Harvey Dent more, because one of the things about this movie that I really like, and I feel is kind of underrated, is how good Aaron Eckhart is. I feel like he's not given enough due credit, because I mean, he's overshadowed, as is everybody in this movie, by Heath Ledger. And the thing is, he's also really good in the movie, especially when he becomes Two-Face. You really feel that man's tragedy and pain come through. You don't get a lot of time with him, but again, this is not a situation where he plays the long game. His mission is very centered on the fact that he wants the people who failed to save Rachel pay. And so that final confrontation after Batman stops the Joker on the ferries being this moment where Dent just has Gordon's entire family at gunpoint and is flipping his coin, half the side burnt now. It's incredibly tragic, and it's an incredibly distressing moment because there's only one outcome to this. And it's at that point of time that you realize that it's all going to result in the Joker's master plan eventually coming together, even though he claims he doesn't have a plan. He's just working off of chaos. But really, at the end of the day, it comes down to the fact that there's only two outs. Either the coin flips in one direction and Gordon's son dies, or Batman stops Harvey, which means pushing him off and killing him. And that's what happens. He does the latter, and he saves Gordon's son in the process. But Harvey Dent is dead, and as far as anyone's concerned, in that moment, the Joker got the upper hand. He pushed people to that limit. I mean, he didn't get to do it with the fairies, but he did it with this. And looking back on all of that, that ending is suddenly made so much more powerful, because it's like, listen, you can't let the world know that he won. It's such a sad thing, because at that some point of time, Bruce is like, I can take the blame. I killed those people. So put it on me. I'm the one who did all this. I killed Harvey Dent, and I'll take the fall for it, and you come after me. Batman is condemned by the public and the GCPD, and he drives off. Everything in this movie is as perfectly done as it can be. It's a fantastic showcase for its actors, a fantastic showcase for its visuals, it's the way it's all directed, the music around it, the everything is just wonderfully executed. And I have really zero qualms with this movie, as I'm sure most people don't really have many qualms with this movie. I love The Dark Knight. I think it's a fantastic piece of cinema. It is one of the best movies ever made, one of my favorites of all time. And I'm glad I got the chance to talk about it with you guys like this. And I can't wait to talk about The Dark Knight Rises. I have a lot to say about that too. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Look forward to more videos very, very soon. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe. And I'll see you guys at the movies.